Isn't life weird? We grow up thinking we have an idea of what the future holds, what direction we want to go, who we want to be, and we normally end up being wrong. Like, not even close. My earliest thought was that I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I only really like dogs, so that didn't make sense. Then from my early years up to my teenage years, I thought I was gonna go to the NBA. Then I wanted to start a clothing line. Then I almost dropped out of college because I thought I was gonna be a songwriter. Not many people know about that one. Then I started getting my real estate license at 19. You know, the perfect age to be a real estate agent. There have been many things that I thought I was gonna be. But if you told any of the younger versions of Darren that he'd become a painter, amongst the other things that he would end up doing, he'd probably say something like,
"What?
And make sure that you also tell him that he won't even start painting till he's 30 years old.
30? I'm supposed to be retired by then."
See, the younger versions of us don't know shit. I've already talked about how or why I got into acting in other videos. So in this video, I want to talk about how and why this guy becomes a painter at 30 years old. While I tell you this story, I'm also going to be varnishing an old painting and then framing it. Your boy has been procrastinating. I've mentioned this before, but I sort of had a hot start. I got an agent in San Francisco, booked a commercial and a TV show all within about a month and a half. And I thought to myself, well, that's it. Superstardom is surely on the horizon. But I got humbled quick, and I went through a period where nothing was really happening. And I realized that I needed an agent in LA. And I started submitting to hundreds. And I mean hundreds, because I wanted somebody to rep me in LA. And I eventually got a boutique agency to sign me. And I was excited because now I had reps in the home of entertainment, Los Angeles. My first audition after being signed was for a Disney show. I drove from the Bay to LA, which if you don't know is about 5.5 hours. I did not do very good on the audition, and so I drove back in defeat. Shortly after, I got an audition for the show Shameless on Netflix, which I was really excited for. So I drove back down, but this time I went back thinking this was just a fluke. I was really excited. I had music blasting the whole way. I was feeling really good. When I arrived, I had to go onto the Warner Brothers lot, which I had never done before and obviously was pretty intimidating. On top of that, when I got into the waiting room, it was the busiest waiting room that I had ever seen. It felt like I waited for an hour, but I eventually got called in. And I immediately noticed when I got in the room that there was a problem. Don't worry, this is still about how I got into painting. Just watch till the end. When I walked in, there was about a dozen people in the casting office. Normally, just so you know, there's usually a casting director, maybe a casting associate, but there's usually 1 to 2 people max. What I failed to realize in my lack of experience was that this was a producer session. And I remembered reading that on the script, but I didn't know what that meant. What a producer session is, that means the whole staff from the show is there. So you can have director, writers, producers, a bunch of the people from the show are there because they need to make that decision that day. They need to decide pretty quickly who they're gonna cast. So I'm immediately rattled. And then the casting director awkwardly goes, "You can start." I say the first couple words and then freeze. Now this is normally not a problem because you would be holding your sides, which is basically your script, in case you needed to glance down and get your lines. That's what they like you to do. But because I was overwhelmed by the whole experience, I left mine in the lobby. Now I turn beet red because I realize I don't have my script on me. I have to ask for a line. They give it to me. I somehow mumble fragments of the remainder of the scene and finish the worst audition I've ever done in my life. And so I left, mortified, and then had to drive back home 5.5 hours, drowning in defeat. It needs to dry overnight before I put the frame on it. I'll see you in the morning. Back to the story while I frame this. So after sulking for a while and wondering if I was even cut out for acting, I dusted myself off, took classes for auditioning, I took different scene study classes, I took classes on just about everything. Eventually, I was able to right the ship and started finding some success and started booking shows and commercials and stuff again. The problem was, even when I started to find some success again, it became really apparent that even if I was booking things, it was only gonna be like once or twice a year. So I started realizing that even on a good year, or an average year for me at that point, I was only gonna be able to act 1 or 2 days out of the entire year. I had chosen the one art form that you can't really do by yourself. You can't act by yourself. I mean, there are ways to act on your own, and I'm doing some of them now, but that wasn't my goal initially. I wanted to work on productions. I wanted to work with other people and to collaborate. You know, that was the goal. If I'm not cast in something or if I don't get an audition for something, I have no control over that process. I quickly realized that I needed some sort of creative outlet that I had control over from start to finish. Something that I didn't need anybody else for. The funny thing was, the signs were there all along. I've been creating art my entire life. I was obsessed with drawing as a kid. I used to create stories and create characters for the stories, and I can remember going to sleep feeling so inspired and waking up and just wanting to work on it. And the most obvious of all was both of my grandmas were excellent painters, and it's something that I kind of forgot until later in life. I like it. But even when I think about the stuff that I was interested a little later in life, clothing line, music, etc., I've always been interested in the arts and in creating and sharing that with other people. I just hadn't really found a medium that fit me yet. And again, I wanted something that I could do on my own, that I had control over from start to finish, but I still wanted to be able to tell stories and share it with other people. I liked drawing as a kid, but it didn't really strike me, so I thought, why don't I try painting? So I drove to Michael's, bought an acrylic starter kit. I bought a canvas that's way too big for somebody's first painting, and I painted this. My dad was a musician and a music teacher, and he passed away when I was 24. My brothers and I didn't play the piano, and he had this really nice piano still at our house, didn't play the piano. So we ended up giving his piano to a close family friend, but I still wanted some way of keeping it with me, and so I decided to paint it. This painting was called Inspiration, and it was supposed to sort of depict what inspiration felt like, where it hits you suddenly sometimes, seemingly out of nowhere. His primary instrument was the trumpet, so was mine, and so was his dad. But that was it. I only needed to paint that to have found the thing that gave me the same feeling and excitement and spark that acting gave me. And although I did it alone, I was still able to then share it with other people, the story, the feeling, the emotion, through this medium. So I quickly became obsessed. I started painting a ton during the pandemic. That was when it really kicked off. I've had my artwork in museums, an art gallery, an airport. I recently got something accepted to permanently live in a new building that they're putting in the city. And I'm just so grateful to have found this art form, later in life, or again, what the younger me thought was later in life. And it's just made me really excited about what the future holds. I was able to find this thing 30 years into my life, a passion that I never would have once thought I would even experiment with or that I had interest in. It's just made me really excited to see, are there still other things that I'm gonna fall in love with? Are there still other ways that I want to share art or tell stories or just any hobby in general? I think that's just a really exciting aspect of life. I think it can feel like if we haven't already chosen our passions and hobbies earlier in life, that we've kind of missed the ship, and it's just not the case at all. So we'll see what's next. Honestly, actually, I scratch that. I don't want any more hobbies. Between art and filmmaking and YouTube and golf, and I've got enough. I'm legit. I'm good. Barely have enough time for these as is. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'd actually love to hear about some of your hobbies in the comments. What are some hobbies that you do now that your younger self would have been like, there's no way I would be into that? Let me know. I'm excited to hear what they are. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Thanks for watching. Hope you like this.